Thanks for joining us as we kick off another week of all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. The government is still shut down. Both sides are holding firm and blaming one another. We're breaking through the noise and getting Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio for his take on the showdown. We're also talking with someone who's in the room where it's all happening, Democratic Congresswoman Haley Stevens, what she says needs to happen to get everyone to the table. She's in Studio C tonight and wants you to hear her message. And it's been rumored for weeks now it's about to happen. The National Guard will move into Chicago, and the city's mayor and state's governor are pushing back hard. What both sides are saying, plus the thoughts of two state senators ahead on The Pulse. But we begin on the other side of Lake Michigan, where a battle over the National Guard is spilling into the courtroom. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says roughly 300 of his state's troops are set to be deployed, plus another 400 from the state of Texas, doing what these men and women are doing. He and his Chicago's mayor are suing, and that comes just hours after a judge blocked the Guard's deployment of troops to Portland, Oregon. President Trump was asked about that in the Oval Office today and says he's ready to take things to the next level if needed and invoke the Insurrection Act.
I'd do it if it was necessary. So far, it hasn't been necessary, but we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. If people were being killed and courts were holding us up, or governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that. I mean, I want to make sure that people aren't killed. We have to make sure that our cities are safe.
So what is the Insurrection Act? What does it say? Well, this is what it says about using a state's National Guard or armed forces to enforce federal law. Whenever the president considers that unlawful obstructions, combinations, or assemblages or rebellion against the authority of the United States make it impractical to enforce the laws of the United States in any state by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings, he may call into federal service such of the militia of any state and use such of the armed forces as he considers needed to enforce those laws or to suppress the rebellion. These are obviously old words that have new meaning here tonight. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson is pushing back, though, saying there were several incidents around the city involving ICE agents, saying they're putting the city at risk. Take a listen.
Agents went into the Humble Park Health Center and detained a sitting elected official, Alder Jessie Fuentes, of the 26th Ward, because she simply requested to see a warrant. On Saturday, they escalated even further by shooting a U.S. citizen. They claimed it was defensive fire. But frankly, we cannot trust anything that comes out of the administration. They are taking police resources that should be in our neighborhoods, serving Chicagoans, and diverting them to deal with the chaos that they are causing. We need ICE out of our city so that we can continue to focus on the strategies that have been working to drive violent crime down.
Authorities say a woman was shot by a federal agent when Border Patrol vehicles were boxed in and struck by other vehicles. Chicago's mayor added he signed an executive order creating ICE-free zones, which basically bans agents from using city-owned spaces and unwilling private businesses as staging area for enforcement. To the government shutdown, which is now in its sixth day with no end in sight. President Trump says he's open to making a deal with Democrats on the Affordable Care Act subsidies that are a key part of the shutdown. Democrats are concerned premiums for millions could skyrocket if they expire. They also want the Medicaid cuts from the president's July spending bill reversed. Talks have basically been non-existent since the shutdown started last week. And the blame game, yeah, you can believe it, still going strong.
The far left base in the Democrat Party has turned on Chuck Schumer because he did the responsible thing, get the lights on. Why? Because they want him to show a fight against President Trump. So Schumer doesn't want to be in this situation again. So he said, my gosh, he got his staff together and he got the far left wing of the party. He said, what do you want? What do you want me to fight on? So they created a red herring.
This is a crisis that requires urgent action now. And Leader Schumer and myself have repeatedly made clear to the White House and to Republicans here on Capitol Hill that we're ready to sit down to work things out, but it has to be done in a way that actually improves the quality of life of the American people.
All right, so we want to cut through some of the noise and just give you some really down-the-middle analysis. And who better to do that than Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio. He told us what he thinks might get lawmakers to come to the table and make a deal.
I think we're going to end up with a standoff until we start to see more political pressure put on one or both sides. And that might come when more people start to feel the impact. I think because right now, most Americans don't notice it. And that's not to say that there aren't any people who notice it. There certainly are federal workers who have been laid off, and even though that they will be made whole when this thing ends, and they'll get their back pay. But that's easy for us to say, right? I think it really starts to make a difference when and if benefits start to be delayed, whether it's Social Security or Medicare reimbursements or Medicaid reimbursements or SNAP benefits.
You'll remember the last government shutdown lasted 35 days from December 2018 until nearly the end of January 2019. We'll have to wait and see whether this standoff breaks that record. No one is hoping it does. That's just scratching the surface. So let's pick up the pace and run through some of the other big stories we're following right now. The Supreme Court shooting down an appeal from Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell. Her lawyers claim she should have never been prosecuted for her role in luring teenage girls to Epstein. They claim a 2007 non-prosecution Epstein that was reached between prosecutors and Epstein protected her as well. That's what they're alleging. The Supreme Court didn't say why they rejected the appeal, which is common. Maxwell is serving a 20-year prison sentence. Well, staying at the nation's highest court, where justices are hearing 3 cases involving presidential powers. The cases involve whether the president can impose sweeping tariffs, fire independent agency workers at will, and unilaterally end birthright citizenship. The tariffs and agency worker cases will play out in November and December, while the birthright citizenship battle, well, that's expected in late winter or early spring. Stay tuned. And staying in court, but going to a lower level, several groups sued the Environmental Protection Agency for canceling a $7 billion Solar for All program. The goal was to make solar power accessible to more than 900,000 lower-income Americans. The EPA rescinded the money in August after President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill passed in July. They claimed they no longer had the authority to administer it, but the groups suing say the law only revoked climate grants not yet awarded, and the Solar for All money had been already. All right, we're turning back to the government shutdown after the break. Congresswoman Haley Stevens, who's in the room where it's happening, is in Studio C, where this is happening. Her take on the standoff. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Here to talk about the government shutdown, her run for Senate, and the news of the day, Congresswoman Haley Stevens. And Congresswoman, good to see you. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse. I wanted to start with news of the day. Of course, the president just a few hours ago basically saying, hey, I'm willing to use the Insurrection Act if I have to get troops into some of these areas. What's your reaction right away?
Look, this is an example of just further abuse of power. This reckless administration causing chaos. And look, very presciently, I introduced legislation earlier this year to tighten some of those loopholes in our laws, particularly saying that a president, any president, shouldn't be able to deploy the American military on fellow Americans when local law enforcement and federal officials or state officials aren't asking for it.
Now, the Insurrection Act pretty clearly in that description that we had from many, many years ago, the act itself reads like something from a history book, but it's not coming to life. But they talk about rebellion, and they talk about essentially the Insurrection Act is something where if there's an uprising, the president can say, wait a minute, I got to protect the federal assets and take care of the people. When you have people, for instance, in Chicago, 70 plus people shot in a few weeks, 11 to 15 people killed in a few weeks. You don't have those numbers in Afghanistan that you have in Chicago. When does it become an emergency, whether or not you agree with the president?
We just need local law enforcement and state officials to be working cohesively together with this administration. That's what we want to see happening here. We all want safety and security in all of our communities. And I certainly feel very strongly about that. I have signage outside my office in the Congress talking about common sense gun safety legislation, reminding that there's some bills that we can put into place. But what we don't need is a president acting outside the bounds of regular order and just dictating that he's going to throw the American military and saying that there's an enemy within on the American people. That's not appropriate.
So if there's checks and balances and there are guardrails, do you think you as Congresswoman, do you believe that that's still true? Do you think that there are strong guardrails in place from the legislative branch to check that kind of power?
Well, let me give you another example. In Detroit, there's some best practices, community violence intervention. I spent this summer on my Made in Michigan tour connecting with families and small businesses and community leaders, and I sat down with community leaders in Detroit on community violence intervention. Those funds have been cut in this administration. That works to keep the violence down. Why are we defunding elements of community safety, community policing, and community violence intervention? These are real mentors working alongside young people to prevent violence. Let's reinvest in that. That's what would come if this administration was actually willing to work.
But Mayor Mike Duggan sat in the chair that you're sitting in and basically said, look, I'm going to give credit where it's due with U.S. Attorney Grogan and the work that he's done to help Detroit. We have these great task forces. We have more money in agents on the streets. We have gang task forces. Things are doing well in Detroit because of the federal help from Trump administration and the mayor's office working together. Good news to have that happen?
Well, and certainly Mike Duggan had a very special relationship with President Joe Biden, so he might have been referring to some of those matters.
He was talking about the current U.S. attorney appointed by President Trump. And that, to me, was a show of bipartisanship. When you have the president, who's a Republican, and you have an independent running for governor saying, hey, it's working. Yeah. We need more of that?
Well, we certainly need to be working together. And that's a very important thing. And certainly when local leaders, local law enforcement, and our federal government are acting together cohesively on behalf of safety, I certainly heard loud and clear that we need more community violence intervention efforts, and we absolutely want to see that go forward as well.
Congresswoman, let's the 2 minutes we have left. What's going on with this stalemate? What can be done? Is there any hope on the horizon as people are watching this tonight?
Well, look, nobody in Michigan wants to see these rising costs continue. Nobody in Michigan wants to lose their health care. Nobody in Michigan wants to continue to see big corporations and billionaires get tax cuts while working families are, frankly, feeling suffocated. And so we need to protect people's health care. This is very serious, and we do need compromise. And so until I see the best deal for Michigan, I can't rubber stamp this.
What do you want to tell everybody on social media? Because that's where this is really spreading like wildfire, and we can thank big tech for making the algorithm work that way. But there's a little bit of misinformation out there that there's all this spending that that Democrats want opened up to fund health care for people who are here illegally. Why is that not right?
Yeah,
why do we need to, what is incorrect about that?
Undocumented migrants cannot get access to health care tax credits.
And you're not trying, you and the Democrats aren't trying to make that happen.
The goal is that 700,000 Michiganders could lose their health care. The reality is that we can stop that. We can lower healthcare costs. This August, notifications went out to employers here in Michigan telling them that their employees were no longer to get covered for X, Y, and Z. We're going to see family of four at $125,000 income see their healthcare costs go up by $7,700. This is when grocery bills are already going on credit cards.
But bottom line, for the talking point that you're hearing out there that says that Democrats, the reason they shut down the government is because they're trying to fund undocumented health care for undocumented people. True or false?
False.
100%. Not
yes.
one bit of truth to
Not
that.
the goal. The goal is to make sure that Michiganders do not lose their health care. This is already in codified law. Folks are playing games. We know that good spending bills are when compromise is reached. This is the one thing. We got a president who's signing executive order after executive order. They've choked out manufacturing growth, 55 tariff announcements in 100 days. Protect people's health care.
How long does this shutdown last in your mind? What's your gut tell you?
I hope they come to the table tomorrow.
Fewer than 35 days?
Look, this could end at any point. You know, it's a compromise around a very simple measure. Keep people's health care, keep costs low, protect the pocketbook of the Michigander.
We're going to protect the pocketbook of this station and go to break because we got to pay the bills. We're going to take a break here. We want to thank you for joining us here, Congresswoman Haley Stevens. Always good to see you. We're keeping the conversation going and talking the state budget after the break. That controversial marijuana tax passed. We're talking with two state senators, Darren Camilleri and Jim Runstead. Next, this is The Pulse. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show, The Pulse. Here to talk about a number of issues important to all of us, including the state budget deal, federal troops being deployed in Chicago, a lot going on. In Studio C, Democratic State Senator Darren Camilleri, and via Zoom, State Senator and Michigan Republican Party Chair Jim Runstead on this show that we know so many people watch. They want to hear your perspective. Senator Runstead, Senator Camilleri, thanks for joining us here on The Pulse.
Thank you.
I want to begin by asking the question that everyone is wondering about. How is it that in Lansing, we had Speaker Matt Hall on our 5 p.m. news today. Governor Whitmer, I just interviewed her a few days back. The tone and the temperature in Michigan, while high, is certainly nothing that we're seeing in Washington. As Senator Runn said, safe to say that perhaps the folks, at least some of them in Washington, could learn from some of the bipartisanship that happened here in Michigan, yes?
Absolutely. We had to all come together to get a budget done, and it took a lot of negotiating, and we did run to the last minute. In fact, we had to do an extension, kind of a continuing resolution type bill for a short period of time, but then everybody came together and we pretty much came to agreement. It is certainly not everything everybody wants, but there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Bottom line, from a 10,000-foot view, I'm going to ask both of you this question, Senator Camilleri. The winners and the losers in this bill, if you will, because anytime there's legislation passed, there's never all one thing. Yeah. What would you say about that?
I would say the biggest winners are the people of Michigan who demanded more from their state legislature. We saw early on this year when the House Republicans introduced their versions of the state budget, they gutted program after program. And because Democrats heard the voices of the people, we stood up and we protected things like the free breakfast and lunch program. We protected funding for health care in our Medicaid system here in Michigan. Due to those changes from the federal policies, we actually safeguarded Michigan from a lot of those cuts that are coming our way. And so I really would put the biggest winners at all of our residents who really wanted to see a better outcome than what they originally saw proposed by House Republicans. And we did get to that bipartisan deal at the end of the day.
Senator Runstead, I know that Republicans are pretty proud of the per pupil funding that's been talked about a lot. That is quite high. In fact, the highest that we've seen. That's a victory for everybody, yes?
It is, and it's preposterous to say that Republicans were cutting the free lunch program. We gave more money, and we said you could spend it how you want. What the Democrats always want is they want to constrain, because there's so many vendors that they use that they peel off and give money to. They didn't want to lose that because it's very lucrative if you say you got to use these vendors. What we said is, hey, schools, you know better. You go ahead and do this how you want to do it. But some of the things I'm just so proud of, the Republicans said for the first time ever, you're not going to be able to give pork barrel projects to your buddies who own private companies. This has gone on as long as I've been there, and I've been screaming bloody murder about it. The Republicans put forward that. Finally, the Democrats had to agree. The other thing that we've had since the spring is the Republicans said, we're going to put the names of any requests and what is the purpose of this request. The Democrats waited till the last second. They did not want to put those names in. They wanted those pork barrel projects and all that money to be hidden away from the people. Thank God the Republicans got that in the bill.
Senator Camilleri, is that good news to have the disclosures and to have kind of those projects that he's talking about kind of more transparent? Is that a good thing for everybody who's watching?
Yeah, it's a great thing. Transparency is always something that we should be striving towards. Senate Democrats did introduce transparency reforms in the state budget budget back in 2023. People don't remember that, but we tied people's names to projects back at that point too. Now it's another step in the right direction for transparency, and we're excited about all of those things. When we look at the transparency efforts that we've tried to get done in this legislature, unfortunately, the House Republicans are stopping our FOIA expansion legislation right now. We passed that many months ago, and we're hoping
that's the Freedom of Information Act.
Correct, and it's been a long time bipartisan priority, but the Speaker of the House said that he doesn't want to take it up. So when we look at transparency efforts, we've got to look at the entire picture of what it looks like to be a transparent state government.
Let's talk a little bit about one group that right now feels like they've gotten hit hard, and that is the marijuana industry. Here, I had someone named Jerry Millen, who owns a place in Wall Lake, Senator Runstead, who said these lawmakers have no idea. They think we're a bunch of potheads running around the place. This is a business that in the last 5 years have produced $2 billion through tax revenue. Why don't they get it? Do you get it?
If you're asking me, I have to say I did not agree with the marijuana tax because for a number of reasons. One, there is a price point where people who use marijuana are going to start going over to the black market. And I think this is the price point. So right now you can legally buy it. You're paying 6% on one tax and 10% on another tax. This is adding 24 on top of those. Now you're getting where the guy in the back alley is going to be able to market his marijuana much cheaper than doing it on the legal basis, which we get no taxes out of that. And there's a whole host of other problems with that. So I just couldn't see this happening. And besides that, I don't think it's going to bring the revenue in that they're thinking, because when you increase taxes, you tend to reduce the amount of consumption.
Senator Camilleri, there are people who are out there who are medical marijuana patients who wonder, is medical marijuana exempt from this 24% hike?
So the tax increase is on the wholesaler, so it is on the sort of the middleman person between the grower and the retailer. I will just say this, I don't think it was a perfect solution. There were threats from our House Republican counterparts to effectively shut down the government if this deal was not taken. There were many efforts by my Democratic colleagues to look at alternative solutions to find additional revenue that maybe was not on the marijuana industry, but I know that many people on both sides of the aisle are looking at alternative options that we can maybe hammer out a different deal between now and the end of the year.
But I care deeply about the people. Hold on one second, Senator. One question for both of you. On the other side of the camera, there are people who use medical marijuana who've never smoked a day in their life outside of that, but they use medical marijuana. Wouldn't the wholesale tax eventually be passed on to the people who are using medical marijuana? I mean, that is going to cost the person who's putting this stuff out there, right?
Potentially, and that's something that I think we should definitely take a hard look at.
Senator, go ahead.
Absolutely it will. And comically, Darren is saying that it was the Republicans. This increase on marijuana was the governor and Winnie Brinks. The
Speaker of the House is the one that got it out of the chamber with more Republicans.
The Speaker kept saying over and over, this was your idea, your vote. Bring your people in and get this vote, get it passed.
Senator?
I mean, Jim didn't vote for the budget in either the schools or the general budget, so I'm not sure how he's taking any credit for this bipartisan deal that overwhelmingly was supported by both Democrats and Republicans, minus a handful of Republicans, including Senator Runstead.
Your hope moving forward, Senator Runstead, about bipartisanship and making sure that in Washington and in Lansing we can work together, because isn't that what people voted for?
It really is. And to me, like I said, and Rupio and I have talked about this over and over again, I can be vociferous in my disagreement with people. And then the minute that is over, the minute I've walked off of giving a speech and go and talk to colleagues on the other side of the aisle and treat them absolutely as, hey, we're colleagues, there's no issue here. I find that not to be the case quite often with them. When I was in charge, the number of bills I ran through for colleagues on the Democrat side out of my committee, they have never allowed a single bill to get a hearing on my side. So it is definitely not cutting both ways, that's for sure.
Thank you, Senator Runstead. Thank you, Senator Camilleri. Both of you who have exemplified that you're able to have a discussion, even disagree without being disagreeable. And we thank you both for your time here on The Pulse.
Thank you.
Please come back.
Thank you.
That is The Pulse for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Rup Raj. As always, it was great to be with you.